It's Friday, the politicians continue to blight our reality, and we still have the week that was. I'm your host, Simon Brown. Joining me as we vent our frustrations, Sasfin's David Shapiro and Gary Booysen from Rand Swiss. Gentlemen, welcome. A month since our election, 2 weeks since we got a president, but no GNU, and markets are worried. Here's Dear John.
Many people here and around the world believe that South Africa's best days are behind it. They are deeply disillusioned by how a country that was once the darling of the world descended into corruption, mismanagement, and economic decline. To those people, I say, never ever bet against the people of South Africa. With the DA at the heart of a new multi-party government, South Africa is now ready to write a hopeful new chapter that defies the odds.
He looks like John Smith, the rugby player. I thought they had the wrong John. Gary, I'm going to come to you in a box in a moment. David, let's start with you. I suppose, what it took Belgium once 551 days. It takes time. Everyone's saying things are panicking, but the market's down 0.8% this week. The Rand is doing what it does best, which is move all over the place. I don't know.
Yeah. When you say move all over the place, because you look at it as an indicator, and this morning we opened up about 1840 or 18, thereabout. We're now 1820. So what do? You run to the news and you try to find, has something happened? Has anything changed? No, just the Rand doing what the Rand normally does. But we need a GNU with the DA in it, And I think the ANC must recognize that. Because I think what happens without them is, as John says, I think we're going to continue to descend into anarchy that we were before this election took place. So.
Yeah, Gary, let's bring you in on the Zoom box. Certainly the consensus from the market perspective is that a GNU, including the DA, is what the market is looking for. The news coming through is leaks and noise and probably best left alone. I have a deadline. Parliament is opening on the 18th of July, so it could be another 3 weeks.
Yeah, it could be another. But certainly, I think the markets are very skittish. Or certainly, traders are very skittish. There was a call that rang out across the office yesterday, in fact, saying the DA has pulled out of the GNU, it's collapsed, and kind of everyone is panic stations. They look at the currency, they think, is this true? And then it's just a poorly worded headline. So I think obviously everyone is very skittish, and I think the market pricing has been very clear. A DA involved in the GNU is what it wants, and we've seen the big strengthening in the local currency. We've seen a massive rally in SA Inc. Securities as well, so from the banks and the retailers, absolutely fantastic until kind of reality dawned that this is going to be a very difficult, very loud, very rhetoric-filled negotiation. And with that, we've lost we were 60 cents weaker at one point from the near term. I don't know if you want to call them highs or lows, the near-term strength for the local currency. So yes, we definitely want to see the GNU arrive. But yeah, it's until the announcement is made and until we see whether there's going to be important cabinet posts and specifically the trade and industry posts, until we know what's happening, I think volatility is going to be the order of the day. Yeah, we might be 18.19 on the currency now, but no telling whether we're going to be 17.90 or 18.50 by the end of the day. Yeah,
you blink, it'll move somewhere else. Also making news this week, our men's cricketers are in their first ever final. And we don't even have a sports minister. But we do have 2 new listings, chickens and cannabis. Former Steinhoff CFO Ben Lagrange is finally in court, while Julian Assange is free and Remgro is free of Momentum Holdings. ABSA versus First Rand updates. It's not a fair fight. The motley bunch at MK get into Parliament, as the IEC says in court, they can't count. And what to do with an errant crocodile? Eat it, of course. But let's start with the other elections out there. Next week, Thursday, the UK votes. And last night, 2 old men got on stage to prove that American exceptionalism truly is over. 330 million Americans, and they've got a choice between one who could nod off trying to tie their shoelaces, while the other is a lying convicted felon and rapist, and orange to boot. For reference, in 1960, JFK was 43 and Nixon was 47. And fun fact, Bill Clinton is younger than both of these two. Bill Clinton left office 24 years ago. David, I didn't watch the debate. I got better things to do. But I've seen some snippets, and I appreciate the snippets are the gotcha moments. But I can't say what the thoughts were.
It's very worried that that these are the two candidates who have the nuclear codes. You know, this is a deep concern. I think it's a deep concern for America, because I think, having watched the debate, I think the Democratic Party is in deep trouble. You know, they must be asking, what do they do now? Because he certainly didn't conduct himself with confidence. You know, Trump was all over him. Yeah, he might have answered certain questions okay, but I think taking this forward, and you know, if he wins, he's got 4 years ahead of him. So you can imagine what he's going to be in 4 years' time.
Yeah.
I think it's a big problem for America. And the way I read it now, Trump is just going to waltz in simply because people are not going to vote for Biden.
And Gary, that is the point. I mean, you know, maybe if Biden wins, it becomes a President Harris rather than anything else. But, I mean, a Trump presidency, we've seen it before. It was pretty wild and woolly last time. It's likely to be wild and woollier next time. We're not Americans, but America matters. It's still the biggest economy by a long shot.
Of course, America matters incredibly to global success. So, and I think it's important to understand that you know, with Trump in the White House again, there's going to be significant changes to the structure of the U.S. system. There's going to be huge changes to the underlying institutions, which is, you know, if you look at a system as complex as the U.S. system, or you know, many international, at least you know, country systems, it's not something that you can change. A person shouldn't be changing that. It's a system that's developed over many years, and the idea that Trump is going to go in there and rip things apart and pull out the wires and try and reconnect things, it's going to break things. So I think, yes, very concerning. I watched the debate this morning at about 5 o'clock, and as you say, I mean, absolutely terrible. You know, you looked like they maybe had pulled, you know, maybe added some drugs to Biden just to give him a little bit of a stimulant, but maybe added them a little bit late, because the start was just absolutely painful to watch. He did seem to perk up towards the end, but you know, if this is what the US has a choice between, you know, very concerning. You know, listening to the commentary afterwards as well, you know, is Biden even going to be on the ticket? They you know, it could change. This is a very early debate by historical standards. So you know, when the US voters go to the polls in November, it might not be Biden on the ticket at all.
Yeah, well, look, I'm busy that week. I'm not putting myself up. Gary, let's stay with you, because you said that it does matter what happens in the US. Of course, the UK votes on Thursday, and with respect to the United Kingdom, I mean, that doesn't matter very much, I suspect. It does for the UKers. I mean, they care, but I'm not sure the global markets particularly matter what's happening in the UK. Gary, your thoughts on Thursday's election in the UK?
Yeah, I think the UK has become, you know, since Brexit, I mean, at the moment, the UK economy has just become weaker and weaker. It's become less and less relevant, unfortunately. You know, the UK population is almost equivalent to the South African population. And yes, while they are a lot more wealthy, you know, it doesn't have kind of the global reach that it used to. And I mean, we can see it from our investor base as well. You know, the interest in the UK markets has also become far less.
Yeah.
You know, people looking at, still looking at Europe, looking at things like luxury goods retailers, looking at things like ASML, but really looking at even the FTSE 100 and saying this is an old world economy that has, you know, some tobacco companies, you know, great, a few commodity companies, but those commodity companies are on our local exchange as well. So I think really a sector of the market that has become less and less important, certainly in the global context.
David, do you have any UK stocks?
No, in fact,
not your one.
No, AstraZeneca somewhere along the line, but it's a historical choice. But what happened is, in fact, we had a presentation from UBS who likes the UK, said very cheap. And I challenged them. I said, okay, give me a few stocks. You know, at the end of the day, Lloyd's Bank or stuff that, as Gary said, you know, you can get anywhere. And with a couple of Shells in or BPs, there's very little you can go in. So the UK market is the one market that we have matched, which is not a good gauge. I think over 10 years, in dollar terms, both markets have gone flat to negative. Yeah. So there's very little to get there.
Well, meanwhile, our politicians can't negotiate their way out of a paper bag. We have formal employment looking ugly, real ugly.
So I think the issue here is we've had multiple years of very weak economic growth. And unfortunately, that has consequences in terms of, businesses' willingness to expand operations, right? Just beyond surviving load shedding, doing just the keep business afloat type of investments, right? You need more structural investments to take place in the economy. And that would be something that really increases capacity to a point where you need more employment. And unfortunately, in South Africa, we just haven't seen that over the past decade.
David, we haven't.
Hello. I wish somebody else would listen to this, because if we don't change this, we're just going to have more of the same. And I think that's the message that the DA is putting out, and that's the message that investors are putting out. It's not going to get better. We have to create employment. And Simon, you have to be in charge of trade policy to do that.
Yeah.
We can't have a repeat of what's happened, and that's a big sticking point now with these negotiations. What the last 30 years we cannot repeat, and particularly industrial policy and a lot of the political imperatives. Time to scrap them and to relook at where we are against that kind of backdrop.
Well, I mean, Patel's out, but we have no idea who
I know, but you don't want the same party in charge. You want a much more liberal understanding of the economy.
Well, here's a good news chaser. We have our first primary budget surplus in 15 years, as government essentially stopped returning the calls of the SOEs asking for more money. Of course, a primary surplus excludes the interest bill, which matters, but we'll take what wins we can. Gary, I mean, this is what the finance minister has promised us, that we would have that primary surplus. It is tiny. It would buy a good lunch for the three of us and maybe one or two of our viewers. But it is, and it's a good news story. I mean, and we'll grab it with both hands.
Oh, absolutely. Any good news is welcome for in the South African context. But I think if you look at the fiscus, our fiscus is incredibly constrained, as you say, excluding interest payments. We need to make dramatic changes to the structure of our economy, unfortunately. But as I said, kind of in the US context, it's very difficult to do that. From a planned approach. People in charge making these kinds of decisions generally cannot effectively achieve this, and largely the best way to do this is to open up economies, is to take a more liberal view, is to allow market forces to do what they need to do, and that unfortunately means cutting red tape. It's politically unpopular, but it's what will succeed. So, yeah, good news. That's great, but a long way back out of the hole that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, David, it is a deep hole, to the earlier point. 10 years, 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, forget, they're not even 30 years. What, 300 years of big hole?
Yeah. And Simon, the point, we continue to look at our businesses. We've got some really good operational businesses. I know Gary looks at South Africa. I was looking at the FM this morning, and Small Talk Daily, choosing 4 stocks. The problem is they can't operate if there's no underlying economy.
There's nothing to help them actually.
There's nothing to
help
help
growth.
them.
There's
no growth. There's no customers. And so while you might have all the operations, without an economy to support you, you're stuck.
And those that make money, kudos to them, because it's tough. After the break, we got listings, a bank standoff, and how about simply eating the problem?